camera is being tested all over the place against the EOS R1, which is Canon's flagship camera built for press and sports and arguably wildlife too. And there's two reasons for that. One is that they were released at the same time, and two is that the R5 Mark II actually has a lot of the same technology as the R1. The difference is this is in an R5 style body and the R1 has it in a big 1 series square body. I personally think that makes this the more flexible option. And although this review is not going to be me just reeling off specs, it's a lot more about the feel and use of the camera, and so you can see what it can do, I do really need to tell you about the headline specs because they are pretty bloody impressive. Inside we have a 45 megapixel full frame backside illuminated sensor. And in the original R5 we also had a 45 megapixel sensor, but it wasn't backside illuminated. Now that should mean we get better readout speeds with the Mark II. This has increased continuous frame rate. You can now shoot 30 frames per second rather than 20 frames per second, which was still great with the electronic shutter in the original R5. Now, the problem when you shoot electronic shutter is it really shows off if you're having rolling shutter issues. And when you have faster readout speeds, you can basically shoot things with the electronic shutter more because you don't have to worry as much about rolling shutter. I hope I've explained that well. Now, I personally think going from 20 to 30 frames per second, one, it's great. Two, I still would have been happy at 20, to be honest. If we drop into the mechanical shutter, we still have 12 frames per second. I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't think they needed to put more in there. We've got tons to work with. And remember, this is 45 megapixels. So we need to think about managing our data a little bit as well. Before we started shooting today and I had an empty memory card, I did a quick test at 30 frames per second, RAW plus JPEG, and 12 frames per second, RAW plus JPEG, so with the mechanical shutter and the electronic shutter, just so you could hear how long you get, basically, because it's all well and good hearing the buffer numbers, but it's nice to know how long you're going to get. So when you imagine that moment of action, someone coming off a diving board, an owl taking flight, whatever it is, you kind of know what you've got to work with. Going to be fun when I copy these off. There it is. To keep things as fast as possible, we have a Digic accelerator chip and a Digic X processor working side by side to process huge amounts of data as quickly as possible. And for your workflow, we have dual card slots, one CF Express Type B and one SD UHS 2, which is the same as we saw with the original R5 and exactly what I'd expect from this camera. We do have a different battery. We're now working with an LPE6P, and that allows you to have full functionality of the camera. You can still use every other battery, the LPE6 right up to the LPE6NH, that's fine. You just lose some of the functionality that's really power sapping, things like 8K 60p. And now you know the headlines. I've got to try and find something beautiful to shoot with this camera. Oh look, I've instantly found it. God, I love Scotland. The R range of cameras from Canon have had great autofocus for ages. The original R5 was really, really good. The R5 Mark II has an upgrade, so we now have dual pixel intelligent autofocus, which just means it's meant to be more accurate. So we have subject detect for people, animals, and vehicles, all of which it seems to be very proficient at. We also have action priority mode. Now, at the moment, that is specifically for football, basketball, and volleyball. I would imagine that is because when these cameras were released, it was an Olympics year, and so they pushed for those three sports. But I'm hoping Canon will extend that via firmware so that there's more sports registered. Basically, what it does is it understands those sports, it understands how people move, what the aim of the game is, and it will move autofocus and understand what is happening. So it knows if someone does a kick motion and it's high speed and it's near the net, it will likely be a goal scoring opportunity and it will focus for that. It'll do the same with basketball and volleyball. It's really impressive. As I say, that's only for 3 sports at the moment. So there's going to be some people who find that great. There's going to be some people who don't really care. The thing that I think is more useful for more people is that you can register faces with the R5 Mark II. So what you can do is, I think it's up to 10 faces you can register. So if you are a sports photographer, you could register, let's say you're sitting at one end of the pitch at a football match, right? You could register in priority order who you want the camera to focus on when they're in the frame. But it's not just for sports. I think that's really, really useful for weddings. So if you're shooting weddings and you've got bride and bride, groom and groom, bride and groom, and you want to prioritize certain people, and it means when you have those messy moments when everyone's leaving the venue and hugging and congratulating, and you want to make sure you get the right people, you have the camera helping you out and trying to focus on the right people in the priority that you've set. I was just talking about all that, doing that piece to camera, and Jakob was like, pretty sure my A7 III does that.
That's right.
Canon, like, it's great you have that now, but where were you for the last few years? We've attached the Atomos to the R5 II now, so we're going to do some AF testing to see just how accurate the autofocus is. When you're ready. Man, it is windy today. Oh, I've got so much dust in my eyes. So we're just packing up here, we're just getting the cameras and stuff set up. I'm going to pop a 100-500 back on this, which is one of my favourite ever lenses, and we're going to head back down the valley. Because we saw that osprey on the way to this area, I really, really want to, I'm hoping we'll see something else, maybe an eagle, even if we're lucky. So I'm going to put this in pre-continuous shooting mode. What that does is it gives you a ½ second of shooting before you press the shutter, and it saves those images. We've seen things like it on other cameras, some forms of it in earlier EOS R range cameras. So if you're shooting 30 frames per second, means you get 15 frames before you press the shutter. So I'm just really excited to have that, just in case we see something, you know, I'm picking it up to take pictures and we've just missed it. So I'm going to pop that on just so we've got the best possible chance. Oh. When I was setting the camera up for this trip, I was setting up like different custom functions and stuff. And I set up the IAF, and obviously you can calibrate that to different light, but I turned that off today just because the light is all over the place. It's really windy. And you can use, of course, the joystick here, but I've actually set it up so it's on half the rear screen as well. So you can obviously touch autofocus, you know, when you're just using the screen, but when it's to my eye, I can put my thumb on this half of the screen and a little orange circle appears, and I can just move it about with my thumb, and it's just really quick and easy. I know loads of cameras can do that, and other R series cameras can do it, but it's just really nice, it just works really well. The R5 Mark II I've been using for this is a beta sample, so I'm not actually technically allowed to talk about the image quality and the dynamic range, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to tell you what I've got from this model. So far, been super impressed, love what it's producing. I knew I would because I love the original R5, so I figured they wouldn't have got worse, right? And the straight out of camera JPEGs, which is not my style. I always shoot RAW plus JPEG just so I've got like a safety net, but I never really use the JPEGs. However, here are a few straight out of camera JPEGs for you with the settings on screen so you can see exactly what it's producing without me doing anything to it. I think pretty impressive, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with it. But let us know what you think in the comments. I cannot wait to see these in the future. You know when they've been established and you get the couple of firmware updates and you learn all the little tricks of it because you've had it to shoot with for a while. I just can't wait to get these back again and do some proper comparative image quality tests with this. For IBIS, we have up to 8.5 stops in the center and up to 7.5 stops in the periphery. So they've separated those two numbers out a little bit, which is unusual. We don't normally get that from Canon. And it does depend on the lens you're using. So that is based on you using it with certain lenses. There's a massive list on their website of how much you get with each lens. But to be honest, it's great with most of the RF kit. I'm going to do my favourite non-scientific test now. We're losing the light a little bit, which means I can do this test, which is basically how long can I hand hold it for. Now, normally I do this with a 24-70, but I'm feeling confident in the R5 II's capabilities, so I'm going to try with the 70-200. Okay, let's start with 4. Oh, it's really bright. Where's dark? The trees. Oh no, there's a couple there. It looks like I'm being weird. Okay, let's see what we can get. So 70 mil, 4 seconds. 4 seconds at 70 mil, pretty happy with that. For wildlife photography, I've actually gone to doing pictures of midges because there are so many. If it tracks midges, 1, I'm going home, but 2, that's very impressive. It's got 1, it's tracking it. No way. They're all over the camera. Do you want some midge spray? I've now donned my winter ski jacket because it's August in Scotland. We are up on a big moor, to be fair, so it's pretty windy and cold up here. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the video with the R5 II. So it can shoot up to 8K 60p RAW internally. 8K gives you so much flexibility. I don't really shoot 8K, but I like the fact that you can crop into 4K and you just have so much compositional flexibility with that. And I think for a lot of people, especially if you're like a wildlife videographer, being able to shoot like 8K 60p from a hide and then being able to crop in and have 4K 60p, that's really powerful. That's really nice to know you've got that. You also get DCI 4K, standard 4K. If you drop it down to full HD, you can shoot 240p, so you've got some really good slow motion capabilities. But if you want to stick in 4K, you still get 120p, so you can still slow things down nicely. For colour grading, you get C-Log, C-Log 2 and C-Log 3. So you get some really good options. No matter your preference for grading, you can pick whichever one that suits you best. When it comes to video and an R5, you kind of can't get away from that initial controversy that we saw with the original R5 and the overheating. Now, Canon dealt with that really, really quickly, to be fair to them. They brought out a fix via firmware. It worked really well. You still couldn't shoot with it as long as you could, say, the R5C that was built for video and had a fan with vents, but they still did a pretty good job of solving it. Now with the R5 II, they have actually built vents into it. So we don't see like a lot of extra depth in the body or anything, but we have some miniature vents down here and a vent at the side here. And the idea is for cold air to come in here and hot air to go out here. But that is a completely passive process. There isn't a fan in that, so you have to rely on the air moving through the camera. I like this way of doing it because if you are predominantly a stills shooter and you shoot some video, that gives you more flexibility, but it doesn't add anything massive to the camera. However, if you want to shoot way more video and you would like a fan in the camera, Canon have brought out 3 battery grips. So there is a battery grip that you can add, which gives you just vertical controls. That's the point of it, and a bit of battery life. You can add a battery grip that gives you vertical controls and an Ethernet port, so you can do fast transfer depending on what you're shooting. Or you can get a battery grip that doesn't have any vertical controls, but it does have a cooling fan with proper vents that push that air through the camera and cools it down better than this passive process. I quite like this. Yes, they could have added something into the camera, but it would make the camera deeper. And for a lot of stills shooters, because a lot of people who shoot with the original R5 aren't video shooters, even though it has a great video spec, a lot of people are stills shooters with that camera and they don't want or need that. So I quite like that Canon have given you the flexibility with that on the R5 Mark II. Oh my goodness, it's wet out there. I hope this weather sealing's good, because that is wet. I never finished the sentence. The design of the R5 II is very familiar. It feels quite similar to the original R5, but there have been a few what I would consider improvements. That depends on what you like. So on the side here, we've got a stills to movie switch. That was where the on-off switch was before. I really like this addition because I like to shoot in a more hybrid way. And on this trip, me and Jakob, who's behind the camera today, have been shooting between us on this camera and flicking between stills and video all the time. And this has been really easy. I just heard an eagle, so I'm just looking out. So if I suddenly disappear, that's what I'm doing. Now, the on-off switch is over here. So we've got off, on, and a lock in the middle there. I prefer that. I think it's simpler to use. When I'm picking up the camera, I'm doing it with my finger that I'm using for the shutter, so I think that's really nice. But again, these are really small problems, right? So with the original R5, none of this is really an issue. These are just nice little upgrades. I like that Canon have refined it in this way. We've still got a fully articulating screen on the back, of course. Got that beautiful viewfinder. It's still 5.76 million dots, so it's still a nice, bright, beautiful viewfinder. I love the one on the R5, but obviously we now have that eye autofocus where it tracks your eye so you can move the AF point. That's been really useful. And I think if you're using it in a place where you've got like more consistent light, so you're using it in an arena or outside on a sunny day or outside on a cloudy day, we've just had very changing light. We've been in and out of forests, so it's been a bit all over the place. So I haven't used it consistently, but when I have used it, it's been lovely. On the port side of things, we've got mic, headphone, flash sync, USB-C and HDMI, all very similar to the original, but we now have a full-sized HDMI rather than a micro HDMI, because that was just a bit annoying. It was nice that they had it, but if you are using this as a professional video creation tool, micro HDMI is just not the best. It can come unplugged really easily. Full-sized HDMI is really what you want, so it's nice they've made that addition. Cards-wise, we've got CF Express Type B and a SD UHS 2 slot, which is what I would think would be right for this camera. So the bigger flagship R1, which is like the squarer 1 series body, that's got 2 CF Express Type Bs, which is what you'd expect, right? This is a slightly smaller body. And we do have a new battery. We've now got that LPE6P. I had a look about what Canon was saying about the weather sealing on this camera. I've got it really wet this trip and it's been absolutely fine. I did that with the original too, and it was also absolutely fine. The build feels really nice. It's these polycarbonate bodies that we're seeing a lot now from Canon. It feels great. I had the original R5 for ages and I didn't manage to scratch it or do any damage to it, and I took it everywhere with me, so I assume that this is going to be a nice hard wearing build. Weather sealing though, Canon has seemed to have made a bit more of a big deal of it this time, so they don't really give numbers, camera manufacturers nowadays, because I assume they don't want to be on the hook if you put it in too much rain, but they seem to have sort of said about this being a weather resistant, you know, use it out shooting your landscapes, etc., whereas on the original body they didn't say it as much, so I'm hoping it has either an improved amount of weather sealing or they now have a bit more confidence in the build. But all in all, yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think they've made some small improvements. What I would say is that the original body I loved. I thought it worked really, really well. It was built in a way that was super easy to use. And the problems that they've solved were very small problems. That's great for this camera, but it also means that it wouldn't be a reason I'd write off the original R5, which I think is important because the original R5 is a fantastic piece and they're really honing it with this camera rather than giving us something that's like, oh yeah, we've solved all the awful issues that it had. So it's just nice to know we've got that. And again, don't forget the vents if you are shooting video. My conclusion is, I love this. I love the original R5. The R5 for me was one of the most perfect cameras. I absolutely adored it. Not just for completely biased reasons like it fit my hand nicely, I love the controls, but the image quality was objectively brilliant and so was the video quality. It was just a great camera. And the R5 II has had a few improvements, so I love this a bit more. When you talk about value for money though, used R5s at the moment, I think for 80–90% of shooters, the R5's probably going to give you everything you need, but this does have some really nice additions like that vent system, the design changes, some bits of the spec that have been updated. There are things that are really lovely about it. So yeah, love to know your guys' comments, what you're thinking, whether you think this is worth the upgrade or whether the original 5 is perfectly fine for you. I'd love to know your thoughts. So make sure you pop them in the comments. We're gonna have tons more videos coming your way soon, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with us. Stay tuned for some more videos soon from MPB.